Welcome to Austinpreneur, our show about the stories that made Austin, Texas a global hub for startups. The show is produced by Capital Factory and hosted by me, Nick Spiller. As a reminder, by joining Capital Factory, you can plug into the ecosystem where the stories on this show were set. Learn more about us at capitalfactory.com. Welcome everyone to Station Austin. Excited to kick off this talk with a very special guest, someone who's been with us at Capital Factory since the very beginning, someone I met as an undergrad through Josh and have watched and thought of as one of the top entrepreneurs in Austin for a long time. I believe he is an Austin native, graduated right up the street from the United States, the University of Texas. My rhetoric's evolved on that. The University of Texas, Wharton grad as well, spent time in this place you know as Silicon Valley. Cut his teeth as a tech entrepreneur there. He's a serial tech entrepreneur and investor, founder of several things. The big ones, Coremetrics, Bazaarvoice, data.world, all massive success, disrupted the internet, disrupted the society. I think it was 23 years ago this weekend, he moved back to Austin on 4th of July, and he helped turn Austin into what it is today. He did that a lot with our founder, Josh Baer, and they worked a lot together. We'll get into that. He's funded 150 startups as an investor, 50 funds, including ours here at Capital Factory. And as of today, he's a USA Today best-selling author.
Thank you.
As of today.
Thank you.
For his new book about the intersection of technology, humanity, and spirituality, Love Conquers Fear. And you'll all get a free copy for participating today. On behalf of Capital Factory, we do encourage you to make a donation to our nonprofit Station Austin if you do believe it, but feel free to help yourself to a book. And without further ado, let's welcome Brett Hurt to the stage.
Thank you. My father. Appreciate it.
Congrats on the book, Brett.
Thank you. And let's make it clear, it's Josh Baer.
Josh Baer.
That decided to buy 200 copies of this book to gift to all of you. So.
Yes, it was. We'll talk about Josh a little bit in a second, but let's start about the book. You could have done a lot of different things. You have done a lot of different things, and let alone you undertook this new adventure of Love Conquers Fear. Why did you decide on this endeavor?
So there's a lot of reasons behind it. I outlined in the book specifically the journey that led to Love Conquers Fear. But if you go back in time, I've long believed that we can create a better world through technology. And I would actually posit that humanity has always done that. We've had, of course, very turbulent periods, but starting with the discovery of fire, we could warm our caves, cook our food, which led to higher IQ, or we could use it to destroy. And most of humanity used it for good. And it was the original technology catalyst that really changed humanity. And when ChatGPT came out specifically on November 30th of 2022, just 3.5 years ago, I really felt this quake in the ground. I knew that was a life-changing moment for all of humanity. And I had been programming since I was 7 years old. I created a lot of great tech companies with amazing people. And I knew that this moment would lead to an unprecedented amount of creativity, efficiency, and ultimately decoding of very hard problems, including maybe the hard problem of consciousness, although that's a whole different thing that we could get into, because I am a very spiritual person, as I disclose on my podcast and in the book. And I think that consciousness is way beyond materiality, but we could get into that. But it is going to allow us to get closer and closer to the understanding of what consciousness is. And the specific catalyst that led to this book was a psychedelic journey. As I talk about in chapter 13 of the book, that was a journey where I had a deep communion with God. You could also say my soul. If you don't believe in God, I completely understand. And I have no attachment to whether or not you do. I will tell you that I grew up being very spiritual and having lots of experiences where I felt the presence of God. And in this journey in particular, there were all these words coming out of my mouth that I did not know what I was saying. And I thought it's going to be really interesting. The only cognition they had in terms of self-awareness is it's going to be really interesting to read whatever this is. And that journey I quote from in chapter 13 of the book, and it was the divine God, my soul, having a transmission. And part of the way I know is a transmission, outside the fact that I had no idea what I was saying, is that I never used the word It was just one linear flow. And so, I disclosed that in chapter 13 and quote from it. And it was specifically that where I was like, this is the penultimate moment for humanity. And God wants us to make it. And I need to write this book. By the way, if you don't believe in God, and around 80 to 90% of all of humanity believes in some intelligence in the universe, whatever you call that, realize that, we're in a universe that is so vast that we now know through the James Webb telescope that there are at least 2 trillion galaxies. We, of course, are in one of them, the Milky Way. And there are 1 billion planets in the Milky Way alone. And so if you look at the universe that we're in, that I believe is actually infinite, but we know when we created the Hubble telescope before the James Webb, astronomers would point the Hubble at a dark patch of the sky and think, what are we going to see? And they saw lots and lots of galaxies. And so the Hubble made us aware that there are hundreds of billions of galaxies, and then James Webb makes us aware that there are trillions of galaxies. And if you add that up, it means there are tens of septillions of planets, which means that there are 10 to the 25 planets, tens of those. So it's just a gargantuan number. And yet there's all these cosmological constants that have to be perfectly tuned or we wouldn't exist. It's very scientific in terms of why we exist and why there's life at all. And, the hard problem of consciousness is this problem of why in a universe that's dead, that has no life supposedly besides us, and people probably know about the Fermi's paradox, that if there's life in the universe, why haven't we been visited by that life? Why in a universe that's cold, that's dead, why would it produce life that then becomes self-aware and has a consciousness? And everything that we love about being human is in our consciousness. It's the seeing your child walk for the first time. It's the loss of a beautiful brother and dear friend of Josh Baer. I'll never forget, the day of being at his funeral. That was really absolutely a horrible, horrible day, but also it was a beautiful day in the sense that there was a beautiful communion of people there, primarily his family, that was getting to heal through that. And the speech that his oldest child gave, Kayla, I'll never forget. So powerful, it's just incredibly powerful, beautiful, beautiful moment. And so, this hard problem of consciousness is like, why would that happen? Where would that come from? And, we're born from stardust. Like we know through meteors that have hit the earth, and, the Japanese in particular have mined some of these, that the signatures for the same 4 letters of DNA exist in other areas of the universe. So we already know that. We also know that most of the water that came to the earth after it was born came from the stars. And, you can go fact check this. And so the oceans are born from water from outside of Earth, interstellar water. And that's where life began. And so there's all these things that we just need to learn and figure out. And the way I look at God is I look at whatever is the force that created the Big Bang, which is the, hypothetical start of the universe. I think that it's real. There was actually a TED Talk this year at this year's TED, which decoded the sound of the Big Bang, because we know that there are vibrations all over the universe. We know that through quantum physics that everything is vibration. And there's a sound to vibration. The sound of my voice right now is creating a vibration. And so it's, we're in this beautiful time of acceleration, and we can accelerate to heaven on earth, or we can accelerate to oblivion, and it's really up to us. And I knew that through this transmission that I received, that I was meant to share it, and that's why I wrote the book. I knew that it wasn't just enough to continue to be an investor and entrepreneur, that I needed to really deeply share this with humanity as a prayer for us to make it to the other side. I'm mostly positive that we're going to make it. And the podcast that preceded this, and is ongoing and probably be ongoing for a long time, has allowed me to hit that from so many different angles. And one thing that has been really eye-opening for me is I thought when I started the podcast, Josh was an extremely optimistic person. I'm an extremely optimistic person. We always believed in the power of people to do amazing things and really seize their agency and create something great. But I really think we're in that moment of ultimate agency for all of humanity, for us to hopefully make it to the other side of this. And the podcast itself made me more optimistic, and I thought it was going to make me more pessimistic, because I thought, I'm so optimistic, I'm going to have so many people on, and a lot of them are going to be more negative than me. And that's okay, because we need to hit this from all angles. And, the book is very clear-eyed on all the risk, but it made me more optimistic, including the most pessimistic people I had on the podcast actually made me more optimistic. So that was interesting.
Well, thank you. It's a wonderful opener as a podcaster, and just such a deep insight. So you received this message from God about the future, and the confluence of technology and our place as humans.
Yeah, and I think by the way, this has happened throughout history. There are many people that have received, messages that need to be shared, and I think that this is how early religions formed. And then there's a challenging chapter of the book. Every chapter in the book is challenging, but one of them is on religion. And the beautiful aspect of that chapter is that all of religion has this synchronous root, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita, which created Hinduism, whether it's the Tao Te Ching, which created Taoism, whether it's, the Quran, which created, the Muslim religion, whether it's the Torah, which created the Jewish religion, Buddhism, etc. It all has, actually, I just recently dug into Sikhism, and wow, that's a really fascinating religion. And it all has this synchronous root. And that's the name of the book. The synchronous root is that we have the agency to allow love to conquer our fear. Christianity, which we're in a mostly Christian nation here, is all about the kingdom of God is found within. And that we can be like Neo in the Matrix if we do that inner work. We can stop whatever is coming at us trying to assault us. And right now we're in a very assaulting environment. We're in a very beautiful environment too. 250 years ago, 90% of humanity didn't know how to read, and 80% lived in abject poverty. So we've changed a lot in the past 250 years. But the problem of this time is that we're suffering from depression, we're suffering from loneliness, but yet we're so connected. So how can that be? We put profits over people. We have algorithms that the social media companies have produced to hijack our amygdala, the fear-based center of our brain, to keep us clicking like a mouse looking for the cheese in the maze. We have chemically engineered food, which keeps us addicted oh, by the way, there's a pharmaceutical innovation called GLP-1s that can cure that. That's a big, big business today. And we have the media trying to always hijack us as well. And we have political parties which are telling us if we vote for their opposer that it's going to be Armageddon. Obviously, two things can't, I mean, it can't be that binary, right? It's like there's so much gray. And so, we live in a world that we've constructed, and we have constructed the reality that we have today, where we're trying to always get more money. And what's the purpose of that? Money is energy, and you can use that energy for all types of good. And Josh really got this. I mean, Josh was incredible in this way. Josh could have continued to just be an entrepreneur himself and start company after company and get wealthier, but he decided instead that he could see the agency in each individual and bring out the best in them and create a much bigger network effect in Austin and the world. And he did that. We really have him to thank for the deep tech boom that's going on right now in Austin. I really think it started with Josh Baer. And that's
right there with them the whole time.
I was, but I could have been there more, for sure. Like I was running my companies, but I did do a lot to help. And
you were kind
he did a lot to
entrepreneur number one for Josh. Josh built the first version of Bazaarvoice, and that was a big part of it.
That's true. That's true.
And every time he talked about you is in the context of supporting you.
Yeah. Well, that's
one of the best entrepreneurs in Austin.
That shows you the type of guy he was. I mean, he helped me a lot. I helped him, but he helped so many. I mean, one of the things this is so incredibly touching and makes me tear up every time. I've had tears every day since he crossed over, is the thousands and thousands and thousands of stories that are being shared. I mean, it is like, I haven't seen this happen since Princess Diana. And my wife, Deborah, was such a Princess Diana fan that she was just glued to the TV for days, Josh there were so many things he did that I didn't know. I knew a lot, but oh my gosh, I mean, it is incredible. The outpouring of love has been just overwhelming. And when there is a memorial, eventually, I don't know where we're going to have it. We need to have it at like a stadium or something. It needs to be like
figuring out
tens of thousands of people or something.
On that, correct.
I miss him. I miss him so much. I show you that photo from this morning.
Yep.
And that photo, I stopped in my tracks. I had to pull over the car, and I just went into a deep prayer about him. And he was just one of a kind.
He had this abundance mindset that I think is very much an idea in your book. And
he was involved in this from the very beginning. Like he was very, I mean, he was well aware of, my awakening, I'll say, through psychedelics, but I'd been on an awakening for a long time, to be fair. I studied Vedanta in India, a long time ago, back in 2000, and let's see when that was. It was probably 2013 is when I went to India to study Vedanta, and that predated Hinduism, and that was all about the nature of the mind. And I grew up with prayer being a regular part of my practice, especially as an entrepreneur, because you face a lot of difficult moments. And I never ask, God to make me wealthy or give me anything. All I asked for was strength. And I got that strength. And the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship is it's such an inner journey itself. Like, you don't even know what you're capable of until you put yourself to the test. And then when you realize how you can transform and bring out the best in yourself, then you're able to help other people do that. And this is really a meta narrative on all of humanity doing that. And it's in all the spiritual texts. It's in Stoicism as well. You can approach it from a completely non-God point of view. And to be clear, like, I don't think God is like some big white man with a beard in the sky. I think it's the force that created the universe. And I think consciousness and the universe and God are all synonymous. Yeah. But whatever it is, it loves us unconditionally and wants us to not extinct ourselves. That was the message I received.
Yeah. Good news.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great book, that's very science-based and does not ever use the word God, called Why Buddhism is True. It's by this guy, Robert Wright. And in the book, he's trying so hard to just make it pure science all the way. And he talks about natural selection and why our brains evolved this way. And then he concludes the book in a very spiritual way. He says, look, I don't know what consciousness is. And by the way, nobody knows what consciousness is. But at least now it's not dogmatically canceled like it was in the past. If you wanted to study the nature of consciousness, now there's a consciousness spring underway. But he said, whatever consciousness is, let's just be very thankful that when the Buddhists were teaching us how to meditate and have a communion, that we learned that we come from love. And he said, what if the more you meditated, you learned that it was dark and scary? And so he said, let's be thankful that whatever that reality is that we can touch, that we know it's loving. Yeah. And he posited that the reason he wrote the book, his calling, Robert Wright, in writing that book, is he wanted humanity to meditate. He just wanted humanity to be like the Buddhist. And, I ended last year in his profile in this book with the family to go on a backroads trip. Josh, Amy, and my family would go on some of these trips. And for our 50th birthday, Josh and Amy went with us to Mallorca for a backroads trip. And it was so much fun. Mm-hmm. And it was me and Deborah's 50th. And it turned out to be Amy's 50th too, which was awesome. But, Bhutan is a Buddhist country. And their GDP, which is not how they measure themselves in gross national happiness, but their GDP is much less than ours. It actually equates to 3 weeks of coffee in the United States. And yet they have better health outcomes than we do. They live longer than we do. They're way happier than we are. Why? Because they live in a country where it's chosen to prioritize, honestly, meditation. Like the king and queen are also Buddhist. And so you learn as a child to have an inner communion. And whether or not you believe in God, that is a very good practice, because it will bring out the best in you and allow you to have presence in the only moment that matters, which the moment we're in right now for everybody in this room. This is the only moment that matters. We can't do anything about the past, and we cannot do anything about the future except make decisions right now that affect the future. So, maybe someone listening to this will pick up a book that I recommend in my book and go on a journey, and it'll transform their life. You never know how you're going to impact people. And wow, Josh Baer is such an exemplar of that. Like those seeds he was planting, his philosophy of just planting lots of seeds and watering everyone's and repeating, that is just that outpouring of the garden he created is just transcendent right now. It's amazing.
Yeah. This morning I watched your podcast episode with Josh on What Conquers Fear.
Yeah, he was my first guest. Yeah,
one of your first. I remember that. I loved it. It was awesome.
That episode was all about deep tech.
All about deep tech.
Yep. Aptronic, Saronic.
You talked a little bit about
Paradronics, et cetera. Yeah.
And it was a blast for the past. Like I mentioned, I met Brett when I was an undergrad at the University of Texas.
Yeah, thank you for that, by the way. You helped a lot back then. I was really trying to make an impact there.
Trying to help the whole time, and feel honored to have a special role in it. But, but looking back and just my experience back then and listening to Josh and you talk on the podcast, you two really upped this trajectory on the moonshots. And there's a lot of this. Austin was a bootstrapping town. That's great. We respect it. But really infusing this, you probably have better words than me, but like Silicon Valley mentality where we're going to go big or go home into our business and entrepreneurial culture when it was very much not the thing. Fast forward today, you know, we see $1 billion plus funding rounds right down the street. You know, how much did your experience as a venture-backed entrepreneur lead to this transmission and this part of your journey with Love Conquers Fear?
Yeah, so, you know, I started out like Josh, and Josh always bootstrapped personally. Like Capital Factory was always bootstrapped, and that's why he owned the company, right? Owns the company. I mean, really, Amy owns the company now. And so, you know, when I moved back, and it's so cool that you remember that it was on the 4th of July, because literally I was driving the U-Haul. You know, Deborah and I still didn't have any money at that time, and as I approached Austin, the fireworks went off.
That's incredible.
It was so cool. And Josh, I was looking
Did
at
that for you. It was like, Brett's coming back. Let's do
Right.
some fireworks, or
Yeah. And, you know, as I was looking for a club to kind of either start or become a part of, I had a club out in Silicon Valley called Mind Exchange. And it was a group of entrepreneurs, including Aaron Hoffman and other people who went on to become very successful, where it's just 12 of us, and we would constantly get together and brainstorm the future. And if there was an entrepreneur that needed help, we'd help them assess their pitch. And so when I came back to Austin, I didn't know that Josh was also moving back at that time. And so Vijay Goswami had this group called Bootstrap Austin, and he and I met there. And Vijay's a great guy and would have different entrepreneurs come in. I was like, great, I don't have to do the hard work. It's already here. And Josh and I both saw it really uniquely. Even though he himself was still bootstrapping, he realized the kind of gauntlet that I threw in the middle of the room. And it really felt like a bit of a gauntlet moment where I'm like, look, this kind of mentality of being so locked into bootstrapping will maybe allow us to create big things, but maybe over a decade or two, you could create something big if you're bootstrapping. And you're probably going to get run over if it's a big TAM or total available market by someone that's VC backed, because they're going to be able to run faster. And the best application of capital, and I'll always say this, and you know, we're trying to assess this whenever we're making investments as well, is when the product market fit is already there and it just needs capital to grow, because there's still lots of risk. And if you combine the two approaches, it's really, really powerful. I mean, Apptronic is a great example.
100%.
It was bootstrapped for 10 years. And then it does a Series A that's $934 million, right? I can't even say that number without laughing, because it's so incredibly awesome. And I'm just so happy for Jeff Cardenas and his team. By the way, that's
Did you see their new robot?
I did.
Just got
I did.
released. Yeah,
this was a big day for Apptronic. And you know, I had him on the podcast. That episode comes out in a week or two.
Nice.
It was a really beautiful episode, like a deep, deep humanity in that episode on their big why and everything else. And so you know, it was throwing that gauntlet down, and then Josh doubling down on that and saying, I think this is right, and we need to combine the two approaches. Mm-hmm. And one thing led to another, and you know, one thing that I could have helped with more that I regret. I have many regrets in life. I don't believe that there's such a thing as not having regrets in life. I don't think people are being honest. I regret not saying yes to Josh when he asked me to be a co-founder of Capital Factory. The reason why is that Bazaarvoice was just taking off so profoundly that it was just all consuming. So I said no to lots and lots of things, but I shouldn't have said no to that, because I've always believed in him. And it's just absolutely stunning to see what this has become. I mean, it's really, really just, it's incredible. This really is the center for entrepreneurial activity in Austin. You know, this is where President Obama chose to come on the beginning of his jobs tour when Todd Park was the CTO. And I'll never forget being in that room and seeing Josh up there. It's this moment where, you know, Obama said, you know, I really like to see like 3 pitches. And so Josh had 3 companies ready to go. And he and Todd Park were asking them questions. And Obama looks at Todd, who has gone on to be, you know, the founder of Devoted Health, which is like worth multiple billions. And he's like, "You're really good at this. You know, maybe you and I should start a VC fund after I'm not president anymore." But to see the absolute love on Josh's face in that moment and the pride, you know, we all had pride. It was just incredible. I'll never forget it. And it happened.
He had a way of gaining respect from the top, most talented people.
Yeah.
That is something I could only hope to replicate one day. And just seeing him in a lot of those moments, and saw Josh get pitched a lot, but it's the moments where you see Josh pitching Obama or a couple other key people that I really remember.
Yeah, Josh was truly unique. There's no replacing Josh, but he would want us to try.
Yeah.
He would want us to try our hardest and act with extreme agency. And the lasting lesson that I was thinking about as I've been processing this is, I was in a board meeting with him the day before, you know, he crossed over, and he was telling me how excited he was that he spent all weekend building the new capitalfactory.com website using AI. And he's like, "Yeah, I budgeted, you know, 6 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars for this." And I was like, I'm just going to do it and just see if I can do it. And he did it. And capitalfactory.com, now if you go to the website, that is a lasting legacy. And it's overwhelming the amount of amazing companies that have been impacted by Capital Factory. But what he was teaching us in that moment was he was teaching us agency. He was leading by example to show us, hey, you can do this too. He'd just turned 50 and was reinventing himself. He never stopped reinventing himself, which is a beautiful, beautiful lesson for everybody. Because, you know, one of the things the book talks about a lot is no matter how you get there, and, you know, it's not like I'm saying that the only path is psychedelics. That's just not true. Like, meditation is a very effective path. There are some people who have transcendent experiences just not doing anything. I had a woman on my podcast, Pariah Beam, who was in the shower, who was surrounded by light, love, felt the presence of God, and that was her awakening. She's never done psychedelics. And so it's not like I have an attachment to that, that I'm going to be very honest with people about what my awakening is. But however you become awake and stop sleepwalking, you then will realize that there's all these programs running in your head. And the programs, let's say that you had trauma as a child, which is a very common program. And let's say you had really bad trauma, like you're sexually assaulted by one of your parents. That's like I was not, but that's one of the most horrible things you could imagine, because you really are a victim. You know, you can't do anything about it as a child. Well, you could run that program for the rest of your life, and it could affect your ability to be intimate for the rest of your life. It could affect everything. Or you could realize that program is running and decide, I've transcended this program. It's no longer serving me, and decide to run new programs in your mind that do serve you.
Yeah.
And the mind can be programmed like that. I use very technical terms for it, but it is true that we have the ability to program the most intimate organ of our entire body, which is your mind. And just realize everything you're doing is programming. If you're spending all of your evenings, you know, watching TV shows that are kind of making fun of humanity, that's a form of programming. You could also be watching TV shows like, there's a documentary on Netflix called cosmic time machine about the making of the James Webb Telescope, which will fill you with incredible hope on how NASA could organize over 10,000 people to build something truly epic that had so many different ways to fail, but yet succeeded. And that's another form of programming. And so, Josh was the ultimate programmer for his own mind. He could have been doing anything that weekend. Instead, he's like, no, I'm going to prove to myself that I can do this. And that will inspire not just everybody on my team, it'll inspire the Austin ecosystem to realize they can do this too, that we all have access to these superpowers at such a low cost that it's less than the cost of a Netflix subscription.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that is almost double clicks on your point he built was the delegation school. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I did. It's beautiful.
It just unlocked my learning with AI. And
it's delegation.school, right?
Delegation.school.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. If you work for Capital Factory, you should have finished it already. Go do it. But the whole idea is stop asking AI questions and delegate tasks to it. And part of it's like a lot of us have these pretty complex prompts and things we're doing with AI. How do you turn that into a skill? How do you save that? How do you know? And just really like, if you're going to do it twice, you need to turn it into a skill and program it. And yeah, I think we have been just unleashed as a team just the last month really with that and some of the things we built, and I'm shipping stuff to GitHub.
Yeah. And he was building, he had built already dozens of things like that. It was just unbelievable.
There's a wide base of AI users and people that love it, but it was like Josh was like the sweet spot for it.
Yep.
And building software his whole life, knew what he wanted, had managed developers, then all of a sudden he just could do it and just build it. And he did. And there's Destroy My Deck. It's another one that he's got. I think go to destroymydeck.com and upload your deck, and
that's a great one.
Pick which VC tears it apart. There's several, and the website is, that is a major upgrade for us.
Yeah. He had showed me how he had programmed a virtual version of me to give the entrepreneur feedback, and he had all these people you could pick from, and you could compile a team of people to take apart the business plan. And
it's things like this.
It's amazing.
It's like when I reflect on Josh, it's like so much of them is still here. And it's like not just his face and his team, these tools and the agents, and I still feel like the podcasts, and it's like, how many more podcasts do I get to go listen to him? I never listened. I've heard him talk live a million times. I haven't listened to one single podcast he did. Yeah. So there's so much more to go do with them.
Yeah.
But I'm drawing this connection between the venture mentality and this bigger idea that you've received. And I wonder, if you just bootstrapped, would you have been on the path to receive this transmission, psychedelics or not? Because I don't know, you tell me, but it's like, what is VC's role in this? I feel like we have a very important one. I bet people would argue that, but it's yeah, I think it's...
So try to imagine bootstrapping a frontier model. It's just not even feasible to think that way.
Right.
Now, eventually it will be.
Robotics company. Yeah.
Eventually it will be, because I really think we're going to solve energy in our lifetime. The sun's rays that fall on the earth is mostly wasted energy, and there is no life without the sun. Everything begins with the sun. And, one of the fun chapters in the book is on climate change and energy. Chapter 4, where we are going to figure that out. And it might be that we figure it out in space first, through space-based power stations. The Japanese have already proven that you can beam energy from space to any power station on Earth as long as you have the right receiver. And in space, you have 5 times the amount of light. There's never any clouds. And we have to solve this problem because we have an energy problem. And we've always had an energy problem. And one of the things I personify in the book is that, capitalistically, it's hard to imagine how you create abundance in a place like Chad today, which Chad has 1 in 8 people in Chad, which is a country of 21 million people in Africa, have electricity, just 1 in 8. Something we take for granted that's happening here right now, powering the lights, this recording, our phones, et cetera. So just 1 in 8, and they don't have stable roads, they don't have healthcare abundance, they don't have food abundance, they don't have water abundance. So part of the crystallization of how to enact this transmission I had received is, let's start with the hardest problem. How do you create abundance in Chad? And there's no other way I can think of doing it than the technology acceleration that we're part of. And so VCs are a part of this acceleration. I mean, we've never prioritized anything in all of human history like the creation of AGI. When Trump announced last year on January 21st, the DeepSeek moment, R1, happened the day before. And Trump made this announcement on January 21st that the Stargate project would have $500 billion funding. Well, that was more inflation adjusted than we'd spent on the space race versus the Russians, or the race to create the atomic bomb versus the Nazis. Inflation adjusted. And since that time, you've had proclamations come out, like Mark Zuckerberg was sitting around the table where Trump was asking people to pledge how much they were going to pledge towards this race, which is this competition we have with China right now. And Mark Zuckerberg said, we're going to spend $600 billion on a Manhattan-sized data center. And Facebook would have never been created without venture capital. It just was not a bootstrappable business. It needed acceleration to become the money printing machine it is today. Now, I'm really sad that Facebook, Meta, has chosen this path of profits over people and algorithmic manipulation, especially when it comes to teenagers, knowing exactly what they're doing. And they do know. Don't ever believe a technologist where they say they don't know what these algorithms are doing. They know. They know exactly what they're doing. They're programming them to get people to be addicted. And the laziest capitalistic way to do that is to understand the nature of the mind and the body and say, I'm going to go after the weak spots. I'm going to go after the things they can't control unless they're very well developed in terms of the inner journey. Now, some people, again, they're developed that way just through all the different life circumstances, School of Hard Knocks, that have gotten them to realize the manipulation machine that we're living in. And so, we're now at the point where there's probably been about 7 trillion pledged worldwide in this race for AGI. So we're like orders of magnitude. And part of that is fear, this fear of the Chinese getting AGI before us and what would happen if they do. And part of that is hope, this hope of, wow, we actually could create a world of unlimited energy. We actually could solve all disease. And we can do that. It's all a choice. So I think that we're going to hit this frontier where we're going to be able to see abundance, and then more and more of humanity is going to demand it. And things can change very quickly. I mean, if you were in India during the days where it was ruled by the British prior to the rise of Gandhi, you would not have been able to see the change. But there is a change that's coming, and the divine is working through us with this technology acceleration. We're the hands of God that is going to force us to make the change. It's make the change or extinct yourself. Make the change or extinct yourself. And I'm 95% certain we're going to make the right decisions. And I lay out in the new models for humanity section of the book on why we should believe that we can. And when push comes to shove, why we've done really hard things. Even during the height of the Cold War, our best scientists worked with Russia's best scientists to really contain and then solve polio, the smallpox. And that was during the height of the times where supposedly we were supposed to hate each other the most. even though there's one humanity and we're 99.9% genetically identical.
Love conquers fear.
Love conquers fear. It's on all the text. Yeah. And now you're in this time where a lot of people are afraid of AI. Only 25% of people in America are positive on AI, which is a shocking number. But one way to think about it is if you could ask a machine any question that you've ever been curious about that has all of the spiritual text, all of the philosophical text, all of the scientific text since the beginning of the written word, what would you ask it? And this is a time for the eternally curious. And once you start using it that way, you will never stop because it's so exciting. You know, I wake up every day with this zeal to say, what am I going to learn today? And it's unbelievable how much you can learn. I mean, like I said, I did a deep dive just recently on Sikhism. If I had done that before, I would have written about Sikhism as well in the book, because it's super fascinating, love conquers fear type, religion that believes in one prime creator. And it's super fascinating to like dive deep on that and then look for the synchronicity between that and Judaism and Stoicism, everything else. It's all there. You can ask all these questions today.
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, and Brett is here for you. If anyone has any questions, then has a mic.
Yeah. Hi, Brett.
Hi. Yeah, good to see you.
Thanks for your book.
Thank you.
As you say, at the moment, the race is towards building more and more data centers, trying to get enough power, $7 trillion worth of scaling. So the idea is that scaling will get us to AGI. But there's good evidence that probably won't work by itself. Do you have some thoughts on some alternate architectures that are more like the human brain, where we can learn language and reasoning with a few million words, not a few trillion, and we can do it with 20 watts and not 20 gigawatts? Do you have some idea on that there may be an alternate approach, architecture that's much more efficient?
So I do think that, the current LLM approach will be bested, and there's a lot of different attempts at that coming, and there's all types of world modeling technologies coming. One thing about thinking that's important to keep in mind as a human being is that we have neurons all over our body. So people really focus on the brain, and it's true, there are the most neurons in the brain, but the second most neurons are actually in your gut. And when you hear that phrase, thinking with your gut or your gut instinct, that is a very real thing. There are also a lot of neurons in your heart. And being heart-led, leading with love, that is a very real thing. Like really checking in with your heart when you're making a big decision. And does it really feel right? I talk about in the religion chapter, if there's a religious practice that feels wrong to you, then trust that it is in fact wrong. There are many practices that are great, that are very love forward. But the ones in the Bhagavad Gita introduces the concept of a caste system, which would mean if you're a woman from one caste and you want to marry a man from another caste, you can't. Sorry, God didn't ordain that. It's so ridiculous. Or if you were born in a caste where it's, the caste where it's primarily manual labor, sorry, you can't be an executive. And it's a really ridiculous notion. And so thinking is very complex. It is a whole body exercise, and there's a lot of emotion involved in thinking. And there's a lot of trying to decode emotion and put in these machines emotion. I don't think that we're going to be able to create consciousness in machines under the current construct. And I don't know if that's ever going to be possible. I hypothesize in The Lattice, which is the science fiction novella that preceded this, that maybe in 2050, we create sentience in machines, but that's after we've already proven that we're worthy enough to get there. Like, we think we're very advanced right now, and in some ways we are compared to where we came from. In some ways we're not. The indigenous communities had a lot more wisdom of how to use the body and the mind than we do. we've had this rise of science, which has been great, lifted lots of people out of starvation, poverty, made a lot of people more literate. But we've lost a lot as we've gained a lot. And there's such a longer path to go because we're very landlocked on a planet in this vast, vast universe where it took us more than 50 years just to get back to the moon. And so it's inevitable, in my opinion, that there will be many, many approaches to try to make machines much more efficient, much more effective at programming, eventually fabricating things from theoretical thin air, from a nanotech, type of fabrication capability, like envision in Neil Stephenson's book, The Diamond Age. A lot of things are going to happen that are going to blow our minds. We're in an age where every couple of years, we're going to say, do you remember when X? We're going to be able to say that every couple of years in the next 10 to 15 years because of the exponential curve that we're in. It doesn't get less exponential. It only gets more exponential. Like a week of tech progress right now feels like a year of tech progress to me 10 years ago. And Josh, very much agreed with that. We've discussed that a lot. He was always fascinated with turning science fiction into science fact. And we had lots of long conversations about that. So yes, I think the current brute force approach of just like scale up just tons and tons of compute to try to solve this problem of AGI is probably misguided. There's a really interesting article by this guy, Rich Sutton, called The Bitter Lesson, which is worth looking at. I have a link to it in the book about how scaling with machines usually beats human knowledge every time, and he gives lots of evidence of that. But it ends in a different type of way than it can be interpreted that way, but he actually is much more thoughtful than that. So I think what remains for us as we go up this frontier of abundance, as we make it, as we allow love to conquer fear and we unite as one humanity, is the most deeply human things that we cherish. Like that's all that's left if energy is completely abundant and we really start to understand what the limits of quantum physics are. We just don't know. We only know what 4% of the universe is made of. We call that matter. We have no idea what dark energy and dark matter is. It seems like there's no way we'll conquer faster than light speed travel. I'd certainly like to figure out if we can, if we could travel interdimensionally or other means. And I think we're going to know. There's certain clues along the way. When Albert Einstein did the mathematics that proved quantum entanglement, he unfortunately never got to see that enacted through a scientific test to show that it was real. But it really shook his kind of the world foundation he had in his mind. And it made him become a bit more spiritually curious. And he was very clear that he was not an atheist. He was very, very clear because some people assumed he was and he wasn't. And Max Planck, the patriarch of the field, became very spiritual. So there's lots of clues we're getting along the way. Lots of things that like a lot of people listening to this or here in the room don't even know that we're 99.9% the same genetically across this planet. That's kind of a clue. Like, hey, a lot of these constructs of my political party versus yours, my country versus yours, man versus woman, my generation versus yours, all of these constructs that we've created, this illusion of separation, aren't really going to serve us as we approach this frontier of abundance. And so a lot of things I think are going to be, the constructs are going to be broken to the point where they have to melt away. And that doesn't mean that beautiful cultural traditions will melt away. Like it's a lot of fun going to a place like Japan and experiencing a different culture, but let's let all the bullshit melt away. All the stuff that divides us, that makes us quote unquote hate each other, attack each other, like all of that we have to transcend, and technology is the forcing function for us to do so. So it'll be interesting to see what AI is 10 years from now. I mean, we're only 3.5 years into this, and And I think the reason that there's so much money going into scaling it up as it is, as inferior as it is today, is because it's so inferior, but yet it's so great. It's so great, you know, and we're really just in the beginning innings of this. So it's a very exciting time to be alive. And I think that was why Josh was jumping in so much personally, not just trying to teach us agency, but he was like a kid in the sandbox. He was always inviting me to come play with him. It was like, you know, hey, you know, pick up a shovel, Brett. Let's like go play in the sandbox together. And he brought a group together every Friday to do that, and really was inspiring them and learning from them on how to create really amazing things with AI, being at the kind of the earlier part of this movement.
Hey, Brett. Oh, thanks.
Hey.
I'm curious. I'm 1.5 chapters in, so the answer may already be in the book. But I'm curious that you imply this kind of like we're at this inflection point. How long do you see that inflection point? Is that like, hey, things are about to change over the next year, over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years? And what do you see on the other side of that? So you're implying like a lot of spiritual awakening. Is this the rapture, you know, to be extreme about it? Or is this just a new age of abundance in kind of the same world we are used to living in, but with just kind of a different paradigm?
I do think this is the time that's been prophesied where we either create heaven on earth or not. I do think it is. And it's up to us to do that. You know, heaven on earth, you could look as metaphorically or mystically or both. I look as both. If we create abundance in Chad, imagine what that does to the rest of the world. Like if Chad has clean water, energy abundance, food, think what the poorest parts of America would have if that's in Chad. And so it's really up to us. I think in terms of your question, you know, one of the most hopeful signs is that the two fastest growing companies in history by revenue are OpenAI and Anthropic. Anthropic in first place, OpenAI in second place. No companies have grown revenue this fast. It was a 1.5 years ago that Anthropic was $1 billion ARR, annualized run rate, and now they're around $47 billion. And just today, it was announced that Fable is coming back online after getting clearance again from the government. And so, you know, that's never happened before. You know, it's never happened before. You know, ChatGPT has 1 billion active users now. So this has never happened before, where companies have grown this fast. It was only possible because of VC backing and private equity backing, et cetera. So I think that these companies choosing to be public benefit corporations is a very hopeful sign. I think these companies choosing to write really thoughtful pieces like The Adolescence of Technology is a very hopeful sign. We didn't see that happen at the beginning of social media. We didn't see that happening at the beginning of lots of these revolutions. We had people like Stuart Brand, you know, I cover in the book, you know, creating the Whole Earth catalog. He had a huge impact on Steve Jobs. But there's a time that there's this amazing thing happening with intentionality right now. And one of the ways I look at it is that we've gone from kind of the revenge of the nerds to the responsibility of the nerds. Like the nerds now realize, hey, they can break the world. And this notion of this attack on capitalism, which I also don't agree with, where there's going to be maybe 12, you know, multi-trillionaires and everybody else lives in squalor, is a ridiculous notion. Like there's no safety for the trillionaires if everybody lives in squalor, and there's no market. And so, you know, we have to move together. And so there's this forcing function of us moving together. And I think we'll get more and more clarity on whether or not we're going to make it in the next 2 years. The biggest test of all is going to be what happens with open source. Because once we create AGI, which I'm very confident we'll create, that doesn't mean it'll be conscious like us. It just means that it'll be able to perform in a much more profound way that it performs at today. You know, Dimas Sasabas' point that he says we're at the AGI moment, and he thinks it's still pretty far away, is when you can take an AI and only expose it to lots and lots of prior information prior to the theory of general relativity and see if it can come up with that theory on its own, just in a novel type of way. Like that would be an AGI type moment, because it's coming up with something truly novel versus just mimicking us. And it is showing signs of intelligence, but my digital calculator was showing signs of intelligence. I mean, I can't compute that fast. And, you know, crazy enough, like when the digital calculators came out, those were banned in a lot of colleges for a decade because people were afraid that it was going to mean the end of mathematics, that people were going to forget how to calculate. And it was stupid. You know, it's like the same thing, you know, our youngest child, Yuzu, brought ChatGPT to Eanes. You know, he goes to Westlake, and Eanes, he was the first child to bring it to Eanes. They met, discussed it, and banned it. And then he gave his speech before he went to Westlake as the end of his middle school on please don't regulate us to the Stone Ages. Like he wanted them to know this was a real moment for us to wake up. And so we're going to have a lot of acceleration that we just can't fathom today. It's going to get faster and faster and faster. And there's so much intentionality going in this moment, which I think is great. But with open source in particular, once we get to open source AGI, it means that the worst actors will also have access to AGI. And that's, I'm not saying the government did the right thing. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. But I think there are some people there that are smart enough that are thinking like, hey, if the terrorists get access to something as powerful as Fable and we're not ready, we're screwed. And that is true. But then there's this open source moment coming, and there's this energy abundance coming. And so if you just kind of think about like scaling everything up to the point that it could be so destructive or so abundance creating, that's all technology. It always can be used for bad or good. Every single technology that we invent can be used for bad or good. So it's with great power comes great responsibility moment that's going to force us to make these choices, and a lot of constructs that we can't imagine going away are going to go away by necessity. It's going to break those constructs like so profoundly that as we put together the pieces again, we're going to realize what you realize, as I talk about in my book on that Grand Canyon trip last August, that once you have nothing but presence with each other, beautiful things happen with humanity. And let's get back to the point where we can truly be present with each other, and abundance is going to let us get there, like where we can truly get back to what makes us most human, that we can say, we're back. And frankly, it's kind of funny. It's like a return to the way the indigenous people already had it figured out.
You are connected to Ray as in Ray, the advancement Plato service, and originally it was very philosophic idea of all this technology way back when. Certainly we're in a better place that where you and I became Mosaic, became Lucas, and you followers. What went wrong at Eloise?
Yeah, the big thing that went wrong, again, is the profits over people narrative. You know, the beginning of Wired magazine was this beautiful magazine about how technology would affect culture. And I was, you know, one of the first subscribers to that and read it obsessively. And, you know, Stuart Brand, you know, writing very philosophically in the Whole Earth catalog about what we can create. So it's the worship of money, frankly. You know, the best kind of example I can give of that is that during the financial downturn where Lehman Brothers went out of business, there was a German billionaire who's worth $3 billion who his net worth dropped by $1 billion, and he ran out in front of a train and killed himself. That should tell you everything you need to know. And, you know, some people criticize me and say, well, Brett, like, you know, you've become very spiritual. That's because you're wealthy. I'm like, go visit Bhutan. They're not wealthy. Go hang out with people in Kenya or Tanzania that literally are on subsistence and see the beauty in their eyes. I'm very excited about this new Pope. His first encyclical was all about the greatness and beauty of humanity. I won't try to say it in Latin. Oh my gosh. Reading this book in Audible, I messed up so many times, and it took me over 23 hours in a studio. It is the hardest public speaking job I've ever had. But I do know how to say encyclical now, at least. He's a very different type of a Pope. He's out there saying things like, we need to be able to see the God in each other's eyes, regardless of race, regardless of religion. That would not have happened with the Pope 100 years ago at all. And, that's a very interesting example of how the clergy is also coming to humanity's rescue, to saying, we need to meet this moment. And so I think that this veil of between us and whatever, heaven is thinning, and the divine is trying to wake up more and more people. And it does not want us, whatever it is, does not want us to extinct ourselves. Like, we are a majestic creation. There is beautiful light and love within us all. Even a terrorist, a terrorist, like, I'm Jewish. October 7th was horrible, horrible, horrible level of violence against the Jewish people by that terrorist group Hamas. It was unthinkable, like, what happened to the women and children there. And there's lots of documentaries on that and books on that at this point. I had nightmares for months, afterwards. But I would actually say that even a Hamas terrorist has the love of God within them. It's just that they have been programmed since they're very young to kill and do hate. And there are some that have escaped that and have become, real agents to try to awaken the people that would condone that type of violence against any human being, which should never be perpetrated on any human being. And, I was asked actually by Byron Reese recently is if I'm a pacifist because of love conquers fear. Like, I'm not. I do think that sometimes you have to do really hard things, like have a war to try to stop terrorists from getting a nuclear bomb, for example. Now, that doesn't mean we did it the right way or we had a great plan, but there are a lot of people that were very up in arms a couple of years ago when the women there, and specifically one woman there, was not wearing her hijab and went to jail and died, through some kind of physical abuse that occurred. And we should have a heart for all of humanity. And sometimes you have to do really hard things to wake people up. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's a great read. If you haven't read the Bhagavad Gita, please read it. Outside the caste system, everything in it is really great. And it takes place on a battlefield. So the setting couldn't be any better. Krishna and Arjuna go out to the middle of the battlefield. And Arjuna's looking out, Krishna's the chariot driver, and is looking out and looking at both sides and saying, wow, a lot of family members and great, great people are going to die on this side and on this side. And he's just lamenting it. And Krishna becomes the embodiment of God. And then Arjuna can ask any question he wants of Krishna about how everything works. And it's this back and forth dialogue. It's really just a beautiful, beautiful, transcendent read. I cover in the book that get the version by Stephen Mitchell, because the Bhagavad Gita has been translated so many times, and Stephen Mitchell's voice on Audible is like as smooth as butter. He's got a beautiful, beautiful spiritual voice. He also reads the Tao Te Ching. That's a great read too that you should read. And that comes from China, right? China needs to rediscover the Tao because it's all about nonviolence. And so, we're in this moment where the stakes are really, really high. And that's why I had to come out with this book. It's a deep prayer for us all.
All right.
So
what is the
lattice? Actually, the first part of the lattice came from a psychedelic journey where It was the how will humanity prove the existence of spirituality? Like realizing that science and spirituality are two sides of the same coin, that both things can be true at the same time. And that's part one of the lattice. And then once we prove that, it unites humanity, and it happens through brain-computer interfaces. And then there's this unprecedented takeoff as humanity unites and we create a Star Trek-like future. So it was a really fun way to play with that and try to give us hope in a non-dystopian science fiction story, which most science fiction stories are very dystopian. You know, there's of course Black Mirror on Netflix, but you actually need those. You do need the dystopian stories because you need to know what the risks are. That's part of what keeps us on the rails. And, you know, this book is very clear-eyed on what the risks are too. I was joking around with a friend yesterday that the way you sell books, and it's great that today, you know, it's announced, I mean, it really kind of blew me away that we're on the USA Today bestseller list. You know, there's 2 million books published each year. Like, so to be in the top 150 is quite special. But I was telling a friend yesterday, I was like, if I called it, you know, Fear Conquers Love, it'd sell more. And there was a book called If We Build It, We Will All Die. And that's by this guy, Elijah Rudkowski, who you can see his TED Talks, who essentially is just like, you know, it's all over, there's no hope, and et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, it is harder to sell a book like this, but it has to be true to your soul. Like, and I want to be real honest with you. There are parts of this book that will make you concerned, but the feeling that most people have after they've read it, and I've had lots and lots of people tell me this now, is hope. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to light the same fire in you that's in me, that's in people like Craig Cummings, it's in, you know, Josh Baer and all the amazing people here at Capital Factory, to light that fire in you to realize, hey, we can make it. It is a choice. We have complete agency in this moment. And it's not just the leaders. You know, we're not just victims of the leaders. Like, we ultimately are a reflection, or the leaders are a reflection of us. It is up to us to change structures that we don't think serve humanity. And it's up to us to act with agency to create companies. And it's up to us to spread messages of hope. It's up to us to do the inner work to transform ourselves, to not just become products to be leveraged. And you have that in you all. And this book, I think, will give you a real sense of that. And that is the most important lesson, honestly, I got from Josh.
Cool. Join me in thanking Brett for coming to Capital Factory. Thank you all again. Thanks to Josh. Grab a book. If you have someone that really wants to read it, probably could grab 2, but just make sure it's for someone.
And if you want a copy of the lattice, it's here.
A copy of the lattice is here. Consider donating to Station Austin to support the mission. Bar will be open for another half hour. I'm here, Brett's here. Let's have a good time. Let's make some intros and do what we do at Capital Factory. Thank you.
Learn more about us at capitalfactory.com.